welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today I have another special guest episode. I got to sit down and have a great conversation with Jessica Waite. Jessica is an amazing human who suffered a very sudden and devastating loss of her husband a few years ago. And I'm not going to spoil anything else. I'm going to let you listen to this. But she, after her loss and everything she suffered through this grief, she wrote a memoir called The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards. So that's going to prompt you to maybe get a feel for what this is about. I will give a quick trigger warning only because of the title of the book, which I've already said. So I apologize. This trigger warning came a moment too late, but there is the use of the word bastard a couple of times in the podcast and maybe a couple light swears here and there. Nothing traumatic. We're not dropping F-bombs, but I mean, I don't know. This show's about death and dying anyway. So I don't mind if you play this around your children, but you know, just be prepared for that. So there is a couple of light swears in here, but I loved this conversation. I had a great time with Jessica, and oh my gosh, she just went through some stuff. I'm not going to spoil anything else, but before we get in, you know, I'm going to ask you to remember to support me on Patreon. You can find me at patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. And if you support me there, you are going to help me to provide pro bono work to those who cannot afford my services. And in return, you will get early access to this podcast. You can see the video of my conversation with Jessica. You get grief affirmations, Q&As, and other bonus content throughout the month. And most importantly, you can sleep soundly at night knowing that you've done something really awesome by helping me out. All right. That is it. I'm going to stop talking and we're going to get right into this episode because I can't wait for you to hear the story that Jessica shares today. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in this week. I have another awesome guest episode. I am so very excited to share with you the great Jessica Waite. Jessica, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and why you're here today.
All right. Well, I'm delighted to be here. I love your podcast. And I'm I'm here because in 2015, my husband, Sean, passed away suddenly of a heart attack. And then in the aftermath of his passing, I started to find out that he had been keeping secrets from me and probably was symptomatic with bipolar mania. And so some of the secrets were compulsive spending and we had hidden debt and
oh no,
yes, infidelity and not the good kind of secrets that you would be happy to find out. And so anyway, and so in the midst of all of the shock and trauma of that, strange things started happening around my home that didn't used to happen. Like my TV and stereo were turning on by themselves, and I was like books were kind of like glowing at me in the library, and my perceptions were altered. It was all very strange. And I ended up writing a book about it. But one of the most important things in my sense making around the whole strangeness and sorrow was I did work with a death doula, and she was incredibly helpful at I guess I'm maybe going on too long for an intro, but I just want to say, like, I did the traditional things, like I saw a therapist and that sort of thing, and that did really help, but I sort of got to a limit with that. And then I did a bunch of somatic things, and that also really helped. But it was working with a doula that could kind of bring in all the pieces and help me integrate it that I felt was like the most important thing for my healing. And so anyway, the book that I've written is sort of, the first half is sort of like tabloid level scandal, and the second half is more about the healing journey and then coming to the place of, you know, where I could at least start to trust the world again after feeling so betrayed and feeling so frozen by a relationship that ended so suddenly in a very bad place. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I am super excited to read your book, which will be coming out just a less than a week after this airs on July 30th. So we'll get to that at the end of the episode though, for sure. Because
Okay.
I want to hear more about your book. But let's talk about your husband's I'm guessing it was unexpected passing. If it was a heart attack, it was quick.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it
So,
was. And so basically he had been on a business trip to Houston and had phoned me after returning his rental car from the shuttle to the airport and said, "See you soon." And then he didn't get on the flight. It was so fast.
oh my
They were
gosh.
never able to revive him. And then I actually live in Canada, in Calgary, Alberta.
Mhm.
And so he was in a different country. And so there was a whole
Oh
bunch of
man.
like bureaucratic things. And so it was really strange. Like I never got to talk to the doctor. I couldn't find out exactly what happened to him and for like months later because it took a long time for the autopsy to be completed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only way like the ER charge nurse that gave me the news said it was a suspected heart attack, but he had just had a physical and and an ECG and the whole bit and
Huh.
was pronounced like perfectly fine and healthy. And so he was an organ donor. So the organ donor people said they could use everything except his heart valves. So then I was like, okay, it was for sure heart attack, but what caused it? And so then months later, we found out that it was cardiac sarcoidosis. It's an autoimmune condition that can,
Wow.
yeah, these white blood cell clusters form in an organ, and when it's in your heart it's almost undetectable. And so
Oh my
yeah,
God.
so that was how he died, but it was, just months of not knowing like what
Um,
could it have been. And then because I was finding out these secrets, which happened like the day after the funeral, like the box of his personal effects arrived and I started
oh
seeing
no.
some things that didn't add up. Yeah. um I was so worried it was some kind of drugs, or do you know what I mean? Like that
Yeah.
toxicology report that would then, be another sort of
Yeah.
a horrible surprise to kind of face. But
Yeah.
no, it was natural causes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I've heard so many stories of folks who have lost somebody suddenly. And when you don't have that time to prepare for your end of life, that's when a lot of times secrets don't have a chance to get buried permanently and they come out. And most times it ends up being things like drugs or, infidelities. But
Yeah.
to find out about this. Now, did he have a diagnosis of bipolar that he never told you or
No. And that was
okay.
the part. So we both had bipolar in our family. So my
Okay.
late husband's name was Sean. His mom was hospitalized multiple times and on lithium for years. My grandma on my mom's side was also similar kind of thing. And so they both had a very recognizable long cycles of like mania and
Okay.
depression. And with Sean, he definitely had obvious mood swings, but it didn't look the way that I recognize as bipolar. And
Hmm.
so he did go to a psychiatrist one time because clearly things were off for him. But he came away without any kind of diagnosis. And what I wonder now is like how much did he disclose, right? And because now like it's sort of between what like I guess if I can, I'm just interrupting myself to say,
Yeah.
if there was a kind of blessing in finding out the truth of these things, it was that it gave me a piece of the puzzle that made other things that didn't make sense suddenly be like, oh, okay, now I understand what that was, or
Wow.
now I understand. And so I didn't know at the time that there is a condition called mixed states bipolar. And so when I looked at, and so basically it's ultra rapid cycles, where you're just, and what it sort of presents as is like extreme irritability, and
Huh.
yeah, and the moods can just swing back and forth really fast. And so I think if he had received a diagnosis, it would have been mixed states bipolar. Yeah.
That's interesting. And that's right now is the first time I had heard about mixed states bipolar. That's a bit of a
Yeah.
tongue twister. I had not heard of that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. So you said you started finding out about this pretty quickly after you received his effects back. After
Yes.
that? So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that, because you're obviously grieving the loss of your husband because you weren't expecting, you just spoke with him. He said he was on his way home, and then
Mhm.
you find out, soon after he'd passed away. Like, how did that, tell us a little bit about how that went?
Yeah, it was, so the lucky thing is that my mom happened to be visiting on like the day that we got the news that Sean had died, and so she was planning to travel on through, but she ended up staying for a month to stay with me and our son, who was 9 at the time.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, and so um I told her a little bit of what I was finding, but not all of it, because it was too much and I didn't want anyone to know. Like, it was really important to me because my husband was um in life a very brilliant and charming and funny and well respected and well liked and hardworking person, and a lot of people looked up to him. He had mentored a lot of people in business and in life, and our son just thought he was the greatest dad. And so I wanted to preserve that reputation and image, and especially for our son, I didn't want to tamper with his view of his dad. And so I felt like I had to hide it from everyone,
Mhm.
which was absolutely grueling, because what ended up happening, and you've probably seen this with people that you've worked with, is if you're not being truthful about what's happening, or at least in my case, there was like sort of a wall around me. And so there were people coming to console me, to, bring food, to comfort, but I couldn't really receive any of that because I was hiding my anger. Um, and I couldn't tell them the
Yeah.
truth of how I was really feeling. And so, yeah. And so, um, in the long, long run, I think that's why I ended up writing a book, because I realized that the stakes of holding that in
Mhm.
were really high, and that I was sort of setting myself up for a lifetime of bitterness and resentment and loneliness. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't want that for myself. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
I have to sort of face this truth, and then over time let other people kind of in on what it is, and figure out a way that we can like let this be true, and
Mhm.
also love Sean, right?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah,
was, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, that must have been so isolating.
Yes. It
Yeah,
was very isolating. I felt
yeah. To
extremely alone.
be, yeah, to be grieving. I mean, to the outside viewer, you're grieving the loss of your husband, but to those, to you, you were grieving the loss of not just him, but what you thought was real.
Yeah, and it felt like every single thing he ever told me must have been a lie. It felt like my whole
Oh,
life was a lie. And
oh,
so then, there was just like really no place to stand
yeah.
um for a while until
Oh
I,
my gosh, you're breaking
yeah.
my heart over here.
Oh, sorry.
No, 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 it's
Sorry,
fine.
but I'm still standing. Everyone,
Yeah,
if this
you
has
are.
happened
You
to you,
are.
anything like this, it's like this is a survivable thing.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and I mean, kudos to you for writing this book, not just to share your story, but to heal, because like you said it just like I would tell any one of my clients, holding all that in is just going to break you down.
Yeah.
You have to process and face that grief. And like I said, it wasn't just the grief of the loss of your husband, it was the grief of the loss of what you thought was true. So, anyway, so you said your son was 9 when he passed away?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did tell, and I'm assuming he didn't know about all of this for a
No.
while.
No, yeah, no. So I kept it as close to the best as I could. And so um, like when I think back to how he reacted, like he was really remarkably, um, open, and like he just has the most beautiful heart. And so we were able to talk through, some of the things that he was facing at school, which was, um, like being the only kid in his class without a dad. Like there were some parents that are divorced, but they still see their dad on the weekend, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And so those things were really hard. And um, but there was a good counselor, and then the other thing is, um, sometimes if he tried to talk to other kids, they'd say he was lying, like making it up, which is also really,
Oh,
I know it's so then like that sort of thing was hard to navigate about. Do you want people to know so they understand your situation, or do you want them to not know so you can feel like you're fitting in with everybody else? And so those were sort of some of the barriers that he felt early on. And then um as he grew up, he and moved to a different school, he sort of had a fresh start, and was able to um just find some ways to really healthfully express himself through art and music and that sort of thing. And
oh,
yeah, so he's doing well now. And
good.
as he was growing up, when there were sort of teachable moments, I kind of did share some of the things
Right.
about his dad, so that and then just like I was saying off the top, like I gave him pieces of the puzzle that made things that didn't used to make sense to him, like
Right.
because he saw his dad blow up. If like he knew there were times when things like weren't adding up in his view too, even though he was only
Yeah.
9 or
Yeah.
younger. Yeah.
Kids are very, very perceptive. They
Yes.
see way more than we give them credit for.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
absolutely. So, did you have people as you started, well, you had found out about this for a while. When you started opening up to others, did you have certain people in your life that were supportive to you so that you had a place where you could talk about some of these revelations you've been uncovering?
Yes. I was lucky that I had some family members who believed me, stood by me, supported me. And then as I widened that circle, mostly people were, like shocked and saddened. They went through the same kind of thing that I did, which was validating in a, in a weird way.
Yeah.
When they'd be mad and I'm like, I know, right? And then they would be like, but he was
Mhm.
also so great. And I'm like, I know, right? And so anyway, it was kind of, yeah, I would say validating and supportive. And but now that I wrote a book that's being published, that's ending up being a little bit much for some people, because the book has a very provocative title,
Yeah,
and it brings in the question of like, are you diminishing his legacy? And
sure.
is it okay to speak ill of the dead, as the
Right.
saying goes? So yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm pushing up against some pretty strongly held beliefs
Well,
there.
and that's kind of a fine line to stand on, because you want to respect them, the deceased in a way, but
Yeah.
also we're all, let's face it, we're all humans and none of us are perfect, right? We all
Yes.
have
Yes.
skeletons in our closet that might come out when we die. And just because someone has left the earthly realm, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to make them a saint, you know?
No, that's exactly right. And the question that's at the center of my book is, can relationships heal across the veil of death? And that's the
Oh,
thing that I'm extremely interested in. And so yeah, and that's the problem that I'm trying to work through, and come
mhm.
to some sort of understanding of. And so um as far as how I feel about the title right now, I actually think that Sean would be proud of me for picking
Yeah,
like such a compelling and strategic title that it's making people interested in the story. And I
yeah,
actually think that for someone who reads the whole book, that his legacy would be expanded rather than diminished. And so I have no
good.
lingering doubt about whether or not it was the right choice, which doesn't mean that other people will feel that way,
Right.
especially if they only
Well,
see the title and make their decision based on that.
this is when the saying can be very literal of don't judge a book by its cover. You know, like we can say that about people and about, situations like your husband, but very literally with your book, you don't necessarily have to judge
Exactly. It's
by
like
its
form
title.
following function for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very interested now. Like I said, I'm very excited to read this. So were there feelings of shame that came with this? And like, how did that compound in with the grief you were feeling?
Yeah, the shame was huge. Like that was probably like the most dominant feeling that I held for a long time. And and that's what kept my thoughts really looping, because in my mind, there was a very clear who was right and who was wrong in the situation. And so, but I was so ashamed of something that I didn't even do. And so finally I was like, hold on, like this isn't right. I can't go on like this. I have to figure out at least how to take responsibility for my part and then offload like the shame that isn't mine to carry.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I hate it. This happens over every time I think of a question and then it just kind of flutters away for me. So
That's okay.
we'll circle back to whatever that one was later. Um,
But actually, I will have one more thing to add
yeah,
about
please.
like the pain, because there's, I guess, multiple prongs of pain, right? So the sorrow of the loss and then the rage of the betrayal. But it was my lowest moments, like when I thought I might not survive, it was because of the shame. That was the very like
Wow.
worst kind of pain, even more than
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I feel like, when people approach you at not knowing the truth yet and just giving you sympathy for the fact that you lost your husband, having that thought in the back of your brain is, would they still feel this way if they knew, the truth?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it makes the question, and even, and probably I was ashamed of myself too, that for not being truthful with that. Do you know what I mean? Because then I was
Yeah.
feeling like, yeah, like I was a liar. So yeah.
So have you gone through any process of forgiveness with him?
Yeah, and that's sort of what the book tracks. Um,
Oh, okay.
I was trying to, for the longest time, will myself to forgive because I've heard that, forgiving is something you do for yourself to liberate you
Right.
from being trapped in the cycle of pain that you're in. And so I really wanted to, but I just couldn't muscle my way into it.
Yeah.
And so what I learned um, through the process is you can't force yourself to forgive, and nobody has to forgive. I don't think it's obligatory,
Oh.
but I did find a way of forgiveness through some actions that I took. And a lot of that started when I consulted with a death doula. That she
Mm-hmm.
made me see like some things that were possible through, setting up a kind of like ritual of
Yeah.
healing. And then after yeah, things kind of sorted down, it felt like forgiveness could flood in, if that makes
Yeah.
sense,
Yeah.
versus me like, yeah, forcing
Yeah.
myself to do it as an action.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that about forgiveness. It's so tricky, and there is just this world out there that everybody's like, you have to forgive people. And you don't, nobody has to do anything they don't want to, right?
No.
And you can also, there's forgiveness of the person and there's forgiveness of the action. So
Yeah.
you can forgive a person without forgiving their action. You can forgive their action without forgiving. There's a lot involved in forgiveness, and it's not
Yeah.
just so simple as saying, okay, I forgive you, all good. Like it's not,
Yeah.
it's not that easy.
Yeah, but I love even splitting those out into things
Yeah,
like so I can do this portion,
yeah,
like that it gives you a lot more agency than just making
yeah,
it as though there's a magic forgiveness wand that you just wave and everything's good. And then you forget. Like, oh
yeah,
yes, forgive and forget being
yeah,
bundled together is a bit rich. Yeah.
right. Well, and you can also forgive without forgetting. Like
Yeah.
that's it's very hard to forget things sometimes, especially if they're, traumatic or have hurt you in some way. It's
Yeah.
hard necessarily to just forget those. But I've worked with people who have suffered losses that aren't death related, like relationship endings. And there's always that, how do I forgive this person? And my first question is, do you want to, and are you ready to? Because if you don't
Yeah.
want to and you're not ready to, then don't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Wait, and I'm so excited to hear you worked with a death doula. As a death doula myself, I'm always excited to hear when other people get to work with us. And also that you found one after to help you work through the loss after, because so many people think that we as death doulas are only here for folks with cancer or
Yeah.
Alzheimer's
Well,
or
that seems like the obvious trajectory. It's when someone has a diagnosis or some, it becomes, clear that there's no recovery. And so like it seems I thought afterwards I was sort of angry, not angry, jealous, maybe is sort of like wishing that I could have known sooner about death doulas because it was so helpful. But no, I think with a sudden and traumatic loss, it was just as important and effective. And one of the things um that happened when I met with her for the first time is, oh, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry because I'm like bringing this right back freshly into my mind. But she said in the most present, calm way, Sean has died. And it was like someone was telling me for the first time versus the charge nurse that I heard on the phone. Do you know what I mean? Like someone just telling me on the phone. I couldn't believe it. And so like her saying it made it more real, but also more gentle in a way that I could absorb it. And so yeah, it's
Yeah.
Time isn't really linear. Do you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I feel like there's there's a lot of merit to working with a death doula even after the fact. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is, like, I personally have experienced that moment where you'll hear that someone has died. I lost my brother unexpectedly, and same year, 2015. And it was, I heard it. My mom was the one who called me, and I knew it was true, but I didn't really, I don't want to say I didn't believe it, but it didn't sink in for quite some time until I finally had that moment of he's really gone. And whether, for me, that just came to me, but to have somebody be the one to say it again and have that really sink in, there's something to that. Because sometimes
Yeah.
it takes 2 or 3 times, you'll know it, but you don't really fully feel it.
Inhabit it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not truly there. So if you were to meet somebody who is in a similar situation to you, they've lost somebody and they're finding out all these things about that person that they did not know, what type of advice would you give to them?
Wow. I
I know,
would
big
just want
question.
to give them the biggest hug in the world and not say
Oh,
anything. Because yeah, advice, I don't know if you could really process it, but what I would want them to know is that they're not alone. As much as it feels like they're not alone. And all I wanted to do was crawl under the biggest rock in the world. And I kind of did that a little bit because my mom was there and could kind of run the run the fort for a bit. But I think I guess maybe it would be that is like hide for a bit if you need to,
yeah.
but then come out. There are so many of us who have been through something like this and
Hmm.
somebody that you know, do you know what I mean? Like find
Yeah.
that trusted person to sort of soften the shell a little bit to let yourself start to
Yeah.
reconnect and feel the support that's there for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or call a death doula.
Yes, call a death doula
Call a
on
death doula.
speed dial.
Let
Speed
them
dial.
let them help you. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah. And any grief is isolating, even if it's, everybody, not everybody, most people are going to lose a parent within their
Yeah.
lifetime. It's something that almost everybody will experience. And even though if I were to lose my mother, well, I will one day, how many millions of other people have lost their mother? It still feels isolating. It still feels like
Yeah.
I'm the only one because I'm the only me that lost the only my mother.
Yes, yes, that's exactly right. So
So
you're totally entitled to those feelings of
absolutely.
the bigness and uniqueness
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
your pain and experience.
And
Yeah.
I encourage people, it does feel isolating. And it's easy for us looking and say, you're not alone. Don't feel so isolated. But if you need to feel isolated, go for it. You know,
Yes,
be
yeah.
selfish with your grief.
I agree. I agree. You just had something cut that
Yeah.
was yeah,
You had
and
something in
you
your
need to
life and it is now no longer there. That's a
yeah,
loss. That's what grief
yeah,
is. So, oh,
yeah.
yay. All right, before we start, moving towards the death deck question, is there anything else you wanted to add about your experiences with your husband and this loss and your grief?
I think I've mostly, yeah, just wanted to emphasize, that things are survivable and um yeah, and that the um I guess that one of the big things that helped me to feel less isolated was also writing. So it's
Yeah.
I think writing's a technology of healing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have anyone and you're not ready to call the death doula yet, like that could be the very first step that someone could take just to start to, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I use journaling with a lot of my grief clients. Journaling is a great way to get it out there, whether it's, pen to paper or typey away on a Word document, whatever works. Like getting it out of here and into the world is so helpful. So kudos to you for making a whole
Absolutely.
book out of it. That's awesome. All right, Jessica. Well, now is the time where I'm going to pull a card from the death deck. So
Okay.
I do it on camera so everybody knows I'm pulling one randomly. Um, okay. This is an interesting one. I've answered this one myself before, but
Okay.
if your spouse died, which article of his or her clothing would you keep and which would you be glad to never ever see again?
That's so funny. So this is I'll answer truthfully because as everyone now knows, I was very angry with my husband. And so I got rid of almost everything from our bedroom in one fell
Oh,
swoop.
okay.
But I did keep his very favorite t-shirt. Which was from Queen's University. I think he actually stole it from the phys ed department. It was just like one of those gray cotton slub t-shirts with red lettering that said Queen's PEC. And he loved that t-shirt, and so that's what I kept.
Okay.
And then the thing that I'm happy to never see again. He didn't really have a lot of like ugly clothes that bothered me
Hmm.
for that. But he did have a pair of shoes that he really liked that had gone past their best smelling days. And so so, so I'll go for like the stinky canvas shoes. I
There you
didn't miss
go.
those one bit. Yeah.
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 My husband tends to wear his shoes until they are sandals. He had a pair of
Holes
sneakers.
poking out the
So his
toe,
whole
and
sides were gone. I'm like, please throw those away.
my son does
Um,
that. He just loves it. Yeah. Yeah.
God, it's like just go buy some new shoes. Um, but I thankfully my husband is still here, but the one thing I think I would keep would be his robe because I wear it anyway. Sometimes
Oh, and it would just be the biggest hug in
it
the
is, and
world. Yeah.
it's one of those like microfiber, like super soft, fluffy ones. So I would keep that, but all his shoes would go away. I'm right there with you on the shoes. Oh, Jessica, this was so lovely. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you the floor for a couple minutes. Please tell us about your book, where they can find it, and if, yeah, any of that stuff.
All right, thank you. Well, so the book is called The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards. It's being published with Atria in the US and Simon and Schuster Canada, and you can get it anywhere that you buy books. So you can pre-order it. You can get it on Audible. It's actually being narrated by like one of the like biggest Audie award-winning narrators, Cassandra Campbell. I
Ooh.
know. I was like so excited and delighted. About that. And yeah, and if anybody wants to see a trailer for it, I have a very talented family member who used to be an animator on a Disney show. And she did an animated trailer for the book. And so they can go to my
Oh,
website,
wow.
which is Jessica, the normal spelling, Jessica, Waite, WAITE .work, and the trailer's there. And they can also, if they want to sign up, I have a monthly newsletter.
Oh,
So I would love
awesome.
to stay in touch. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'll put the links to that in the show notes as well. And I saw the trailer for your book, and I wondered about that. I'm like, I've never seen a trailer for a book before. So
Yeah, she did the most amazing job. I couldn't believe it. And it's
it
her
was
vision. It's her vision. And so
really,
this is, yeah, like so she made that and Sean was her uncle who she loved. And so I really feel like I'm so proud of the work that she did, and I hope everybody will check it out because
that's
it's
awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
great. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for being on my show and telling us your story. Like, this is great. I hope, if nothing else, if there's anybody out there who is unfortunately going through the same thing you did, I hope they feel a little less alone today.
I hope so too. Thank you for having me, Nikki, and
All
thanks for
right.
the important work that you do in the world.
Oh, thank you. Another huge shout out and thank you to Jessica Waite for coming onto my show and bravely sharing her story with me, although she is bravely sharing her story with the whole world in her book. So you can find more information about Jessica on her website, which is Jessica Waite, that's spelled WAITE .work, WORK. So jessicawaite.work. You can find information on her book anywhere you'd like. Her book is going to be released on almost a week from today, so it'll be July 30th. So go out and look for that. You can find it anywhere you find your books, just like she said. If you'd like to pre-order it, I believe you can probably do that by now. I think you could do it as of the time we recorded that interview. So go ahead and get a copy. I told her I'm going to wait until it's out there and I'm going to get a copy so I can support her. So I think you should as well. All right. You can find me if you're interested in doing so at NikkiTheDeathDoula.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Nikki the Death Doula. I would love to hear from you sometime. Tell me what you think about the show. And you can also find me on Patreon, as you heard at the top of the show, at patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. That's enough. I'm going to stop talking. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. Have a lovely week. And remember, as always, your grief is yours. Your feelings are valid. Grief doesn't always have to suck.